Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Spooney Scrapbook. And it's a very special episode because we will look back. We'll talk about 1984, but we really got to focus on this picture you see in the front of your screen. And of course, that's the Class S champion, Ansonia Chargers, who, for the 21st time in their history, captured the state title a couple weeks ago against Bloomfield. And, Coach, couple things I thought about. It had to be really good to get over the hump, but also to beat Bloomfield because they've kind of been a thorn in Ansonia's side for the last probably 20 years. Ansonia's beat them, but they've beat Ansonia. So getting by them had to make it that much more special for you guys.
Mike, it meant an awful lot to win the state championship, and certainly against such a quality program like Bloomfield that's been there so many times as we obviously have. And we had lost a semifinal game to them in Ansonia, tight game about 4 years ago, and we had lost the state championship game to them about 7, 8 years ago, and we really knew we'd be in for a battle, and it certainly was. And we have great respect for the Bloomfield program. It's been one of the top maybe 4 or 5 programs in the state over the last 30 years, and we're very fortunate to play as well as we did and come up with a victory.
Right. And Coach, let me ask you, I mean, you've been through this so many times. It's hard to put one over the others, but to me this one had to mean a lot for you because I look at this Ansonia team and if people get upset that I'm comparing it to a pro team, that's fine, but I look at that 96 Yankees team that always came from behind. Every time you thought you had them, they'd come back and win the game. And that's what I saw a lot with this Ansonia team this year because if people look at this team and they didn't follow it, they'd say, oh, they must have dominated. But there were a few games you guys were down at the half, and this team always came back in the second half and did what they had to do. So they were great. They knew how to play the game when they were ahead, and they knew how to play the game when they were behind as well.
The team certainly did, Mike, and there was never any panic in the team itself. They really believed that even when we were down at halftime, even this game, especially when they had driven about 85 yards in the last 40 seconds and scored and went ahead. They scored with 3 seconds to go and went ahead on the extra point. And all of a sudden we found ourselves behind after we had started off 14-0. We were behind 21-14. We certainly were in a situation where we were very concerned, but by the same token, we always believed we'd come back, as we had so many times this year, and we were able to do so.
Right. And Coach, talk about the Naugatuck game a little bit because it looked early on like Naugatuck was dominating. Then you guys stop them on a big third down. They go for the field goal. They made the field goal, but I really felt like that was a turning point because had they went up 14-0, you never know what the game could be like. And then you guys get that touchdown right before the half, and I just felt like at the half that you guys were in control of this game, and the second half the defense really played tremendous.
It was so important to get that score right before the half, and when Naugatuck had the ball 4th and inches to get a first down at about our 7-yard line, and we thought that it would be very difficult to stop them on 4th and inches. They had been moving the ball fairly well, and then they ended up getting the delayed game penalty and kicked the field goal at that point in time. And then we were able to drive and get in right before the half when Dave Cassetti caught the ball and came out of the backfield and made a great play to just get in the corner of the end zone. Again, we were behind at half, but there was no panic, but there was a true belief that we would be able to come back in the game, and we were able to do that.
Right. And Coach, the other thing too that I really thought was tremendous was just the way like the team came out in the second half. They really looked like they were poised to win the game. I mean, they wanted to win it, and it just felt like you said before, they never panicked. Every time they went out there, and took care of business. Like they were a team that stayed together and they didn't get down on each other. And I really thought that was a big reason why you guys were so successful.
It definitely was. There was a lot of encouragement from one player to another. No one really cared who was going to be the standout player on this particular game. They really hung together very well as a team, and it was certainly very rewarding to watch how they played together.
Right. So, Coach, talk to me a little bit about the game against Woodland because, again, early in the season, Woodland gave you a good game, and then this game against Woodland, again, they were ahead at one point, but again, you guys persevered. You did what you had to do. But that was a nice little rivalry you had with Woodland this year. Both
Well,
games were played very tough.
Woodland has some excellent players. They have some very good skilled players. They have some very nice size for a high school football team up front. And we jumped them in the early game. We broke a couple of long runs, and they were battling from behind, and it got a little out of hand in our favor. But in this game, they moved the ball well early on in the first half. They made it a little difficult for us to do some of the things which we pride ourselves on doing at times early on. But eventually, we were able to get the running game going and pound out some very important drives, and it turned out successful. But Woodland was, again, a team with some very good players, well-coached team, and we just believed we would hang in there somehow and come back, and we did.
Right, definitely. And Coach, talk about David Cassetti. What a year he had for you guys. What a past couple of years he had for you guys. I think he had like over 2,000 yards this year alone. I mean, just a tremendous player on both sides of the ball. And I mean, really, I mean, he was tremendous throughout the stretch for you guys.
David was a great runner, an outstanding linebacker, and and he didn't catch the ball as much as he might have in the past because he was doing everything. He was running. At times in the hammer, he was blocking for Mackay when the ball was being run to his side when he was blocking. One thing that was a little bit different that David had to do that many of our great runners didn't have to do in the past is that he had to play. A lot of our runners played both ways, but they played both ways as defensive backs. David is one of the few tailbacks that also played as an inside linebacker. And as an inside linebacker, you're getting banged up every play. You're running blitzes. There's no time to take a play off. And it's a tough assignment for a tailback, running back, etc., to also be an inside linebacker, especially in our defense when we blitz a lot. So he was in tremendous shape. He set the bar for himself, and it was out there for the other players to follow his leadership as far as lifting and dedicating himself to making sure that he was in the best possible condition to be able to play both ways every play, and to be able to still run the ball the way he did in spite of his fact that he had to play defense the whole time.
Right. And I can't say enough. One of the things about Ansonia over the years has been both their offense and defensive line. And I mean, the job the linemen did in those games, I mean, especially the Naugatuck game, they made it so difficult for the quarterback for Naugatuck in that second half. I mean, just talk a little bit about the defensive line.
On defense, we did have some very, very good players who were big and strong and fast. We had Alex Romanowski, who was one of the better two-way players in the whole state. He's made a number of all-state teams already. Tracy Ray was another real big player who could actually run very well for a big player as a defensive end. We had the two Mackays. We had Big Mackay, who was also a defensive end, and a tight end that came in as he was really a defensive player for the first time as a senior. We had Alex Romanowski and Adrian Mercer, or not Alex. We had Jacob Romanowski, who was only a freshman that started on offense for us and also played quite a bit of defense, as did Adrian Mercer. We had Preston Zabina, who was an outstanding defensive end and all that. But the one thing that hurt us a little bit the whole year, though, for a long part of the year, was that Preston really missed almost the whole half the year with just tremendous high ankle problems, and it limited him in a number of ways, but especially on defense for that push off and the rush to the passer. I mean, he just played with tremendous pain. He just gutted it out, but he was hampered quite a bit from his normal skill level, and he'll be just a great player next year. But we did have some, and also Brendan Lynch was a starting center who was just every play he knew what he was doing. He helped with calling out who was blocking whom, and he was just so effective for a center for us. So basically, we had a lot of linemen who played very well for us.
Right, and I mean, Coach, I mean, how gratifying is it though? Because I mean, I think sometimes when you go through the tough times and you see the losses that you have, sometimes you appreciate these wins even more and these championships even more because you know the work that everybody puts in, the players, the coach and staff. So how rewarding was this championship?
This was as rewarding as anyone we've ever had, to me personally, and I think to the other staff. I mean, not to say one's better than another, but we've been coming off a couple of tough years. We lost to Naugatuck last year, which hadn't happened in 10 years or so. And then we got blown out by Cromwell in the playoff game. And, somebody might look at your schedule, look for last year and say, wow, you guys were, I don't know, say 11-2. We had a real fine year. As far as we were concerned, we had a real poor year. And this year's team just worked so hard in the off season, but the pressure was on the whole year. I mean, until we got to Naugatuck, until we got to the playoff, no matter how well we were playing, it was hanging over our heads still. That's just how you played last year. And if you don't beat Naugatuck, you don't win a state title, you're going to have the same kind of year you had last year. And Naugatuck was such a key to this season. To go up there, to come from behind, and to play so hard and come back. That game meant as much as any regular season game has meant in an awful long time in Ansonia to those of us who have been around so long. It really was a very, very special Thanksgiving Day game, but especially with the loss of last year hanging over us, and to go up there and to come back and win the way we did. And then obviously to come back in the state final and win the game was certainly so gratifying. But those two games were very, very special games in the annals of Ansonia High School.
Yeah, it definitely was. And I mean, it was a tremendous championship. One that, again, I mean, these players, because these seniors especially, they kind of had a really crazy football career. I mean, there was no season their sophomore year. They got to come back their junior year, but they missed their whole sophomore year, which I don't care how good anybody is. When you miss that sophomore year, it hurts you a little bit because, again, that's a learning year too. And they never got that. So the fact that they won a state title is a real credit to the work they put in as well.
It did. Chris Kaminsky did such a job at quarterback for us now. When he was a freshman, he opted out to play Pop Warner football. When he was a sophomore, we had no season because of COVID, obviously. He had to come in and start as a junior and did a nice job, but with no real involvement in the system up to that point, it was a little difficult for him. And you talk about a hardworking leader. He was just a special kid in that area. And we knew he could play. He would help us out on defense, but you can't take that chance until the season is really winding down because it's such a long season. And he was so important as a quarterback. Obviously, when you get down to Naugatuck in the state playoffs, there's no tomorrow anyway. You have to win and you have to stay alive. So he played all the time on defense and just did a tremendous job besides his job at quarterback. And he ran the bootleg for the clinching touchdown. And he actually, if it wasn't for the potential injury factor, he would have run the ball a lot more during the year. He made a big run against Naugatuck when we were struggling to establish our running game. He would have been an even better running quarterback if we didn't have to play him on defense at the end of the year, and we could have taken a few more chances. But he was so important to the team that we really had to caution ourselves with that kind of use as we were moving along, even though it would have made us a more effective team at the time.
Right. So, Coach, let's talk about another championship. I mean, let's talk about 1984, because last time we talked about that great 83 team. Now, the 84 team comes in, and there were changes, especially the biggest change was Coach McAllister retired and Bobby Lisi took over as head coach. So, again, you talk about pressure. Even though Bobby was with the staff, now he's trying to establish himself as a head coach. And this team is also trying to see if they could repeat as champions, which is not easy when that 83 team was just so talented and you lost so many players. So let's just talk about 1984. What was the expectation going into that season?
Well, after Coach McAllister retired, everybody in the whole staff was 100% in favor of Bobby being the coach. We were totally unified. We wanted Bobby. He wanted it. And we went to the season. We knew we had some very good players. We had lost a number of good players from the '83 team, but we had some real tough players, some tough linemen. We had Jeffrey Capola, the quarterback, coming back. We had a couple of receivers, and Pat McNamara and Terry McNamara and Pat Ahern. Ellis Ings was coming back. We had Derek Abbott's. John Hunt was probably the best tight end in Connecticut. He was an all-stater at that position. He was coming back, although he had played just defense the year before. And we had Mike Shookman as a lineman, Billy Smith, who was as tough a nose guard maybe as we've ever had, and he also played both ways then. Eddie Sharkey played as an offensive tackle. Chris Schumacher, Gigi Hotchkiss. We had a lot of outstanding players. I mean, Derek Abbott's really helped keep the team together as a fullback and a linebacker. He was just a tremendously tough kid. Jeffrey Griffin. Keith Maynard started as a defensive back. He made some very big plays, including one of the biggest plays in the Watertown game. One thing I've always said, I think that when Bobby took over that year was one of the toughest regular season schedules with the quality of the teams we've ever played. We opened up with Holy Cross. We beat them. We've been pretty good, I think. But that Holy Cross team, I think, went 8-2 and went to the state finals and lost to Wilbur Cross 3-0. We played a real good Shelton team.
And they were the Hoosie champs that year.
They were the Housatonic League champs. They only lost one game, and that was to us. It was down there. We beat them by about 14 points, and it was a real tough game down there. They went 9-1. Sacred Heart was very good. We beat them, and then Torrington, which was supposed to be the best team in the NBL, we were in a barn burner with them. Unfortunately, we ended up losing 30-27 on a field goal with no time left. But then Torrington, to show you how tough the NBL was that year, Torrington, after beating us, lost to Holy Cross, lost to Watertown, and lost to Torrington on Thanksgiving Day. I'm sorry, not to Torrington. Torrington lost to Watertown on Thanksgiving Day. But they also they lost to Benell in another game. But and then Watertown, may have been as good as anybody. Watertown went 9-1, just like Shelton did, and they played Stanford Catholic, whom we had beaten the year before, in an out-of-conference game. Stanford Catholic won the FCAC that year. And you win the FCAC, you got to be a pretty good team. And they lost one game that year. They lost to Watertown. And we beat. Oh, and then we played Derby. And I think they were 5-0 or 6-0 at the time. We beat Derby. I think Derby went 8-2, and they only lost to us and Shelton.
Yeah.
We had a gauntlet like we've never really had going through the season, week in and week out, as far as the caliber of teams we were playing. And the interesting part of this is Jeffrey Capola was returning quarterback, and he got hurt early on. And before the regular season started, he got hurt. He was hurt even coming into the preseason. And our second team quarterback quit the team on us. We were sort of left in a lurch. And our third team quarterback had only played a little bit of JV quarterback. He's a senior, a great kid. He fought an unbelievable number of childhood ailments. Was Johnny Glenn, Bucky Glenn's son. And John Glenn quarterbacked us the first 4 games. We beat Shelton, and we beat Holy Cross. We beat Sacred Heart with John Glenn as a quarterback. And he just did, without the job that he did for us, we never would have gone to the playoffs. He played tremendously. And then he was as good a great a team player. He stepped to the side when Capola came back. And then we went on. That team, as I said, Derby would be pretty good that year, and Derby was a very good team. And then we played Watertown. We were in a scrape with that, and we were talking about who's going to make the big play. Well, Keith Maynard intercepted a ball and ran it back for a touchdown to put us ahead, and we were able to stay ahead. against them. So all in all, it was a very, very rewarding season. And then we got to the finals, and we played Putnam, who was undefeated, who won 20 games in a row, and we were just quite a bit better. And we had beaten Naugatuck also by 4 or 5 touchdowns, I believe, on Thanksgiving. So we were really on a roll then, and I think we scored about 50 points against Putnam and just put them away. We played extremely well that whole year in '84. We had very good players, and we had a coaching staff that was all. It was showing we missed Coach McAllister. He was a great coach and a great leader for us, and we were able to make a pretty good run. And unfortunately, we lost the one game to Torrington by 3 points. We ended up second in the state to an undefeated Middletown team, but it was especially on defense. There were some real tough high school defensive players there, and they would really whack you. And we were very successful. We had some younger kids in the secondary, but did a great job. Jay Strang, Greg Sackham was in the secondary along with Keith Maynard. But other than the Torrington game, we played extremely well on defense the whole year.
Right. And Coach, I think the worst thing that happened to Derby that year, though, was you guys lost the week before you played them, because, Derby would have probably liked you guys to be undefeated, because it's tough enough to beat Ansonia once a year. It's definitely harder to beat them twice in a row. So I think, maybe not the players, their kids, they're going to play with their hearts out, but I'm sure the Derby coaches were thinking, this is not a good thing, because these guys are going to be hungrier than they already are going into that game. So it's ironic that, the week before Derby, you guys took a loss, because in a lot of ways it kind of helped you, because I think those kids came back with a chip on their shoulder.
Well, we did. We really knew that our season was on the brink. The pressure was on the players, and to be honest, it was also on the coaching staff. Coach McAllister was gone. There was a lot of rumors around town that we couldn't win a big game because we lost to Torrington, and Coach McAllister was gone, and Bobby was a young coach, and it meant an awful lot to us as a coaching staff to play the way we did against Derby, to win 35-0 against an outstanding football team, and after that we didn't look back, and we ran it right to the end.
Yeah, and it's funny you talk about what was going around town, because by that point, Ansonia had started to win so much that I think a lot of fans just expected it every year. So you guys, you were like in a no-win situation. When you won, it was expected. And when you lost, you're getting criticized. Oh, what happened to you guys? I laugh when sometimes, even to this day, I'll sometimes hear an Ansonia fan say to another one, what happened to Ansonia this year? And I'll say to myself, God, they went 11-1. What do you mean what happened to them? But that's what they kind of expect in this town a lot, is that, one loss is not a good season. And that's how it was in the 80s a lot of times.
Mike, the 80s, the 90s, the 70s. Once it started, that's the expectation. That's our expectation, though, Mike, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
we expect to win and go to the state titles and go to the state championship and have a chance to win. We don't do it all the time, and sometimes when we don't do it, it really hurts. But we'll never have lower expectations than that when we start a season. It may not always come to fruition, but those are our expectations, and those are the goals that's set.
Right. And you talked about two players in particular before, Ellis Ings and John Hunt, and just tremendous players. Ellis had a tremendous year that year, and John, like you said, was probably the best tight end in the state. And I think he even went to the University of Miami for a little bit. So, to get a big time.
He was about 6'4". He could run like a deer, and he was tough on defense. And he got a full ride to Miami.
I lost you for a second, Coach. What happened here? Well, we'll see what's going on with Coach Sponheimer. But we were talking about John Hunt and, the impact he had on that 84 team. He was very good, very good.
I believe it was funny, but up until that time, the New Haven Register, when they did the All-State team, would have 3 receivers and 2 receivers and 3 running backs, or 3 and 2, whatever. But there was no specific tight end position. When they saw how good John Hunt played, they changed the All-State team That's how they did it for many years, to an actual tight end position. So where they would have one tight end, two wide receivers, and two running backs. But John Hunt was the first player selected actually as a tight end.
Right. And I mean, it was just a tremendous team. And I think that, was good for Bobby to get that first year, I don't want to say out of the way, but get that first year done and to have a state title, had to be it had to be relief for him because, again, he was replacing a legend. And at the time, I think Bobby was only like 32, 33 years old. So, I mean, he was a very young guy. So, a lot of pressure on him.
Yeah, well, no doubt about it. As I said, between the schedule and coming off always going to the state finals and winning 6 out of 8 of them, and all of a sudden he's the head coach, and it was certainly challenging, but he was up to it.
Right. So let's talk about 85, Coach, because this was another very good Ansonia team. And they were ranked number 1 in the state, I believe, early in the season. And I know it didn't end the way you guys wanted it to. I think you guys finished 9-2. But as you played Seymour that year, that was the first time in a while. And I know Seymour was pumped up. They were talking about they were going to beat Ansonia. And you guys came out there and you really sent a message to them. Just talk about that 85 season, because I know, again, when you go 9-2 or 10-2, you don't, in Ansonia, you don't look at it as a great season, but a lot of talent. And Jeffrey Capola really had a great year that year as well.
Jeffrey Capola was an outstanding quarterback that year. We had the two receivers we had. When you look at the statistics that they had, you would have thought we were in a run and shoot offense, but we weren't. It was still play action and running the double, running the tandem patterns and things like that. But Terry McNamara was the player of the year in Connecticut. He had 18 touchdown receptions, and he caught 88 passes. And Pat Ahern, the other end, caught 17 touchdown passes. He had 55 receptions. They both had well over 1,000 yards. But the one thing we didn't have that year, and Jeffrey Capola was the All-State quarterback. One thing we didn't have that year, and even when we were winning early on, we didn't have a real strong running back. And when when in the years I had been in Ansonia, starting with obviously Roger Rings and Terry Golson and Michael Parks, we always had a tailback kind of running back. Terry Antrim, Earl Stanley, Ellis Ings. I mean, always had a running back that you would say, okay, this guy can carry the ball 25 times a game in a tough game, and we'll be fine. And that year we were scrambling for running backs, and so we were able to throw the ball early on. We played Derby; they did a great job taking away the pass, and that year, I know it was such a tight year. I know the Houstonic League had 3 teams win state championships: Derby, Lyman Hall, and Sheehan.
Yeah.
And Shelton was right up there with them, and we beat Shelton again. We beat them pretty good. It was Hurricane Glory. We played them on a Sunday, and we still beat them by 4 touchdowns. We lost to Derby by a point. They beat us 7-6, and they played very well, especially on defense. And Derby went on, even though they lost to Shelton. I believe Derby lost 2 games. We lost 2 games. But out of like 1,200 points to qualify for the playoffs, say, or 1,100 points, Derby was at 1150, and we were at 1145 to get in there. It was that close. If one of our opponents who had won another game, we would have got in, and Derby wouldn't have. But Derby did get in. They went on to beat Immaculate in the playoff game, and they did a great job. But even in the other, I think that I know no one went undefeated in the Houstonic League, and I think that there was just either a 3-way tie or a 2-way tie for the Houstonic League championship that year. The teams were just so equal, and then we played on Thanksgiving. The game was postponed due to rain. If we won on Thanksgiving, after when Derby got beat by Shelton, we would have gone to the playoffs, and they wouldn't have. And we got beat 32-28, I believe, by Naugatuck. They really ran the ball well against us. And so we played the X. We had beaten Seymour, beaten them pretty well, and they had Jay Hillman, who was Jay Hillman was probably the best running back in the Valley that year. We, as I said, we had a better running game, we might have been a little more successful. But we talk about again the Ansonia definition of success. We went 9-2 and had a tough year, only because we fully expected to go to the playoffs, and that was the first time we didn't go to the playoffs. So It was a very strange feeling going to watch Derby, and we rooted for Derby, but to go to the playoff game and not be in it at that time was a strange feeling. But we threw the ball all over the place that year and did a great job of it, but we just didn't have enough of the running game to carry us through.
Right. And coach, back then too, I mean, listen, there were no spread offenses back then. The fact that Coppola had over 35 touchdown passes that year and two different receivers scored over 15 touchdowns. I mean, that's just, again, talk about the talent that has come out of Ansonia. I mean, those three guys alone, just what they did that year was remarkable, considering you didn't have a running game either.
Well, it was interesting. I'm not sure exactly how many Jeffrey Coppola threw, because he got hurt against Derby with 2 plays to go in the game and didn't play the next week against Watertown. And Watertown had a great quarterback, Enrico Bronia, who became a Major League Baseball player, and he was the All-State quarterback the next year, or in '87. He was a sophomore. He came in there, and James Lane came off the bench for us, quarterback against Watertown, and he was in a shootout with Enrico Bronia. I think we scored 5 touchdowns, and he threw 4 touchdown passes, threw for about 300 yards as a sophomore. And then Jeffrey Coppola came back the next week, and he went to the bench, and he knew as soon as Jeff was the All-State quarterback. As soon as Jeff was able to get back, he was going to. And he quarterbacked the next 2 years and had a great college career. We always laughed about that there's nobody we knew that threw 4 touchdown passes, about 300 yards in passing, and then went to the bench the next week. But
and let's not forget too, Coach. I mean, he almost came in and won that Derby game. He threw a great pass to, I believe it was McNamara.
It was Pat McNamara who caught the ball at about the 2-yard line. But Derby got a huge sack right before that when Coppola got hurt. We lost about 15 yards on it, and we actually had first and goal from about the 7-yard line, I believe. Right before that, we made a first down on 4th and maybe 5, and got to about the 7. And I guarantee you, had we had a running game, we wouldn't have been throwing the ball. I'm not saying we would have scored for sure, but when Ansonia's had first and goal on the 7-yard line, I don't know if they've ever thrown the ball on first down or first couple downs when they've had it. But again, that was the genesis of how we played that year. We had the way we moved the ball best was still throwing the ball, and Mac, I think James Lane came in for 1 play, I think.
Yeah.
And he threw a post pattern, and McNamara caught it on about the 4 and got about to the 2, but the Derby guys brought him down, and we had a score to win the game, or because you couldn't make a first down because we started off first and goal. So Derby made a great play on the play, even though we completed the ball, and they won the game.
Yeah, and I mean, that game is out there. It's on YouTube, and it's just a fun game to watch if you just like watching football. I mean, both teams left everything they had on the field that day, and I mean, when I look at that, it's kind of bittersweet, because it's sad to see that rivalry really isn't the same anymore, and the crowds aren't the same, because God, you look at that crowd, there wasn't an empty seat that day.
Mike, for decades was never like that, and it was I grew up going to Derby games, even though I didn't go to Derby High School. My aunt was a teacher there, and I went to about 8 Derby Ansonia games in a row, and I always rooted for Derby. And then all of a sudden I started coaching Ansonia, and I still lived in Derby for many of those years, and the rivalry was just so intense, and between Coach DiFilippo and then Coach Charlie DeCenzo, who was a grammar school classmate of mine. I knew when he first moved into Derby. I've known him for 60 years or so, maybe more than that. The rivalry, and and Derby had such tough kids and kids who came from parents who had played for Derby and brothers who had played for Derby. And, and especially there were so many close games in the series that you had to be fortunate enough to win and to be successful in that series. And for the most part, we were, but we took nothing for granted. And Derby beat us a few times, and we really thought we had a chance to win, and we didn't. So hats off to Derby for how they played for so many years against us.
Right. So, Coach, before we go, and I want to touch more on this the next episode, but I just want to ask you this. Did you, as coaches, have an idea around Thanksgiving time that Bobby and Jack were both not going to be back for the 86 season, or was that something that was just unexpected?
I thought there was a good chance that Jack wouldn't be back because John, he was going to hope to go see John play college football, and there was a good chance that he was going. That's what we knew. But what happened was that Bobby, at Thanksgiving, there was no question in my mind that Bobby would be coaching the next year at the time. But all of a sudden, there was an opening in special ed to be the head of the department, and that was the area in which Bobby taught. And for a number of reasons, he had to apply for the job for professional development. For his family, and it was just so important. And it wasn't able to be worked out that he still could remain the football coach and be an administrator in that job. Unfortunately for us, because Bobby was I thought he was a great young coach. And but that all happened later in April and March and April and May. When the season ended, there was no thought in my mind that Bobby wasn't going to be the coach in 1986. But when all this happened in the spring of '86, there was a job opening and things changed.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that next episode because, there's always been a lot of debate about that whole season and what happened. But, I figure we need to spend some time on that. So we'll definitely talk about that. But, Coach, again, congratulations on the 21st championship. Listen, it's hard to win one. To win 21 is just remarkable. And that's a credit to you guys, the players, and I really applaud you guys. And great job and congratulations.
Well, as I said, the players did an outstanding job, and Coach Brockett was just unbelievable this year. The way he coached this team, the way he led this team, it was a very special year.
Well, congratulations again, and I look forward to the next episode. But I look forward to seeing you coach many more years. So great job again.
Oh, Mike, I'm not sure about many at all. I have no idea right now what's going on. As of right now, I'm expecting to coach, but who knows? Who knows what the future is going to bring? But we'll certainly see.
Well, Coach, thank you again, and best of luck whatever happens. But I'll talk to you hopefully next week, and thank you for doing this again. I appreciate it.
It's always great to speak with you, Mike. Take care. Bye
Thank
now.
you, Coach. And of course, that was the one and only John Sponheimer. For Mike Kenichi, this was Spooney Scrapbook saying good night, everyone.